Thank you for joining us for tonight's Inspiration webinar. Inspiration Software is the embroidery software line of G7 Solutions and designs in machine embroidery. Our Inspiration Software line includes My Block Painter, My Quilt Embellisher, Perfect Embroidery Pro, and Perfect Stitch Viewer. Tonight's webinar features our Perfect Embroidery Pro and What's in My Toolbox. We have a wonderful team assisting us tonight. Me, I am Dory Nanry, manager of the tech support for G7. We have Nancy R., Chris L., both are part of my team. And then we have the ever so humble and birthday girl, Tamara. Our speaker will show us what is in her toolbox tonight. Again, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the webinar. Say happy birthday to Tamara. Go ahead, Tam.
Thank you so much, Dory. I will remember that. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about the Perfect Embroidery Pro platform and the tools that are in your toolbox.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us. We are G7, and we are offering, for your pleasure tonight, the Inspiration webinar of Perfect Embroidery Pro and What's in My Toolbox. We have a wonderful team assisting us tonight. Me, Dory Nanry, manager of the tech support, Nancy R. and Chris L. of the tech support team, and the birthday girl, Tamara Evans. Our speaker will show us what is in her toolbox. Again, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the webinar. Be sure to tell Tamara happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much, Dory. And your birthday is coming up. I will remember. Welcome, everyone. Tonight's webinar is on Perfect Embroidery Professional and about the different tools that are available. So it's kind of an overview. We won't get in depth in any projects, but we'll show you what they can do and maybe how they've changed over time and what you can do with them. Before getting into the software itself, I do want to go over my Inspiration Today page. For those of you who are new to it or haven't been to an Inspiration Social yet, this is where you can click for software support, for the online manual, and for the latest Inspiration update. Of course, the software tells you if there's an update available, and you can choose to download it at that time or not. But if you want to double check, you can click here. In addition to these things that come up when you're online, they're only accessible if you have an active internet connection. You can still use the software without it. But you also have my daily inspiration, which is a tip or a photograph, something that changes, and it changes every day, from Eileen to inspire you. The monthly inspiration webinars, like we're doing tonight, and we do have 2 per month. The other one are the free monthly projects. These are primarily right now on PEP, Perfect Embroidery Pro, and you can certainly download those, and they come up every month. And Eileen's weekly software inspiration blog, which usually comes out on Saturdays, if not Sundays. Then my inspiration resources, which tell you where to go to find other information, how to contact the help desk, how to get into the forum, which is awesome, and all of those type of things. Then, of course, you can click here to select your preferred authorized inspiration dealer and register for Inspiration Socials. And don't forget your 5 free designs every month in each of the software platforms. Now, let's go ahead. We already have a design page open, and for those of you who may be brand new to the software, this is our design page. Most everything is done on this page. Sometimes additional windows will open, but we don't have to flip into a lettering module to do lettering or any of that. It's all done right here. One of the important tools on the design page is the ruler. And if I right-click on it, I can toggle back and forth between metric and inches. I think in inches. I like to do things in inches because I can visualize inches. I don't visualize millimeters, but sometimes I have to switch back and forth because perhaps my hoop size is in millimeters or instructions were given to me in millimeters. So I can do that. By right-clicking, it brings me up different options. I can show the grid if I want to. I have mine set up at 1/4 inch intervals. You can set yours up however you want to. I can change my grid settings right here as well and show them as dots or as lines. I can snap to grid if I'm trying to do something very precise and want to set my grid at a certain spacing, so when I am creating something from scratch, it will snap to that grid line, so it will be very accurate. Okay, so that is the grid. Now, if you look across here, one of the things that makes the software so user-friendly is that whenever I hover over an icon, it tells me what that tool is for, what that icon does. This is the monogram tool and the text tool. Here's my shape tool. And it gives me a brief description, so it reminds me I don't have to remember that this is the Align Center tool or Center Align tool, or how to do it with shortcut keys and vertical align and horizontal and all of that. So if you hover over it, it tells you what it does, which I think is awesome. Now let's go over to the design library, and I'm going to select a design. Let's just pull in this little bird here first of all, just for fun. Now, when I'm looking at my tools over here and I'm on the left-hand side of the screen, this is my select tool. My select tool is the tool I use the most. It allows me to select a design or to select part of a design. When I bring something in from the design library, it comes in grouped, so it makes it easier for me to shrink it down or rotate it or move it somewhere within my design page, and even delete it. If I right-click, I can click delete. I can also click up here. We have tools done in a lot of different ways. Right-clicking will let you know what you can do for every tool that you can use for what is showing on the screen. So I can convert to, create outlines, do lots of things like that. I can also cut it, copy it. I can't paste it until I copy it, but I could delete it. So just like that, I can get rid of it. Let me pull in, let's do another design, and we'll do the butterfly here. So here's my butterfly. Let's go through the tools over here on the left-hand side first, because it shows me a lot of different things. First of all, here's the lasso tool. The lasso tool I use to just select part or an element of a design. If I can't pull a square around it, I will lasso it. And in this case, it selects the whole design because when it comes in, I can see up here it came in grouped. So I can click ungroup. Now, if I just want to lasso the antennas and get rid of those or do something different with them, I can. And come in here and select those. And I picked up part of it because I'm not very good at lassoing, even though I'm from Texas. So I can select just that part of that design. The next one is to do shaping. And we're going to talk about that one a little bit more in a minute. These are a little bit more specific. My zoom tool allows me to click and zoom in on a certain section of the design. If I come over and double click on my zoom tool twice, it brings my design back into full view on my screen. Okay. One of the things that we'll skip back up here to the ruler because the double click brings it into the screen, but it doesn't position it in the center of your palette. If I come in now with a design select or a design on the screen and click Center Origin, now my design is located, the center of my design, noted by these little symbols right here, is at 0 and 0 on my design palette. So it's in the center of my screen. The hand over here again on the left-hand side is the pan tool. It lets me, if I click on it, now I have a hand for my cursor, as you can see right here, and I can move the screen around however I want to, which is very helpful if you're working on something specific down in the corner. The next tool is my ruler, and you'll notice when I click on it, my cursor turns into a crosshair with a ruler. If I want to measure the size of the antenna, I can left click and drag down and see that that is 1.31 inches and let go. The backdrop tool does some things a little bit differently, so we'll get back to that as well. 3D allows us to look at a design in a more realistic mode. It's going to show us the stitches, and we can see the thread and the thread depth depending on how you've set your parameters, and it looks more like what it will when we stitch it out. The next tool down in our line is the grid tool, and we can choose to show or hide the grid. So I can just simply click right here to turn it on and off. Now again, if I click on the ruler around my my design area, I can also say to show the grid or not. There's more than one way to access many of these tools, so it becomes a matter of just what you're comfortable with and what you're used to. The next one down in our tools on the left-hand column are my stitches tool. I can select to show or hide the stitches. If I hide the stitches, I'm seeing my outlines, possibly some manually laid down areas on that design. It doesn't show me every single stitch that's out there. And it takes it out of 3D view as well. So if we want to look at stitches, and again it's the same, it's out of 3D view when we turn them off. So if you want to see exactly how the thread is going to fill in that area, you generally leave stitches on. But sometimes you need to get underneath the top layer of the design to see a little bit further. Another thing you might like to click on is stitch ends. Now you see the design changed pretty dramatically. When we zoom in, every one of these little dots is a stitch. Let me go back to my select tool. And with that turned on, I could look at where individual stitches are. Now, to actually move an individual stitch, I would have to come up here to the stitch tool where I can select an individual stitch. Whoops, let me click on that better here. I'm not in that mode. Click on the stitch tool so that it's highlighted. And if I wanted to move this stitch over here, I can do that. If I wanted to select an individual stitch, I may even want to delete that stitch by right-clicking on it or hitting the delete key on my computer keyboard and just delete and get rid of all of that. Or I can move it. If I've got a jump stitch I want to bury somewhere, using the combination of the stitch, showing the stitch ends and the individual stitches, clicking on that editing function allows me to do that. Okay, let's go back into full mode, and I'm going to turn off the stitch ends because all those little dots kind of tend to get on your nerves or in the way of what you're looking at. The next thing in our line of viewing options are the commands. Now, commands are things such as, let's see, if I turn off, let me turn off the stitches here and you can see it a little bit better. You see the scissors right here. And I'll go back to my regular select. Here's my scissors. That means that there's a trim right there. my needle with thread. That means there's a color change right there. It shows me those commands so I know exactly where they're located and when they're going to happen. If I look in my sequence view while this is on, I could also see that with my commands selected, I can see where those commands are. So we turn them on with the information. So I see all the different selections in here, and then off. The next one, and let's turn our stitches back on for this, is our hoop command. This is where we can select a hoop to show around a design and see how it will fit in the hoop. For example, if I'm going to stitch this in a 100 by 100 hoop, I would click Apply for that and click OK. Now I can see that my design is not going to fit in this hoop. I could possibly rotate it or resize it to fit in there. But with the hoop command is another option that's relatively new with the software. That's one of our updates. And it's called Auto Fit. If you click the small arrow, after you have selected a hoop, click the small arrow right below the hoop function and click Auto Fit. Now my design fits perfectly within that hoop. And with that being said, Dory, do we have any questions so far?
At this time, we have just a couple questions, and one of them is, at the last webinar, this Nancy attended. The presenter said we were in digitizing mode, but didn't explain how we got there. Are there different modes? And if so, how do you access them?
That's a great question, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. Right now, and I'll show you how the tools are divided up. Over here are all of my view tools, right in here. So I can turn things on and off. If I want to turn off my hoop, I just click it again and it goes away. My backdrop tool and my artworks tool. So it will show those if there's any on the screen or available in the design, which there aren't at this point. These are my viewing tools. This is the zoom, the pan, the measuring, and the backdrop. These are my editing tools. My digitizing tools are located up here in this top section, okay, at the top of the screen, starting with manual. Let me go to the very first tool in that row, and that is New Page, and I will click to open up a new design page. And let's start with the tools here. Manual lets you digitize a manual stitch. Okay, so now I'm in digitizing mode. I'm actually creating stitches. And a manual stitch lets you continue until you right-click and end it. If I look at that with my stitches, let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see. You can tell that wherever I clicked, there's a stitch or a needle drop. So this is a very long stitch right here. I can do a similar type of thing with run, and it works a bit differently. If I click and follow a similar path, and when I finish, I right-click. Now you can see in run mode, let's put it in 3D, every place there's a little dot here, it's taken that same path or a similar path, but it's turned it into a run stitch, which means my stitch length is 3 millimeters, as you can see over here in my properties box, and it's a standard stitch, and that's what I'm digitizing. Now, I could select that and say, change it to a two-ply bean motif and all of those different type of stitches. But that'll be for another webinar. I just want you to see the different digitizing modes you have. Satin stitch, you can input your satin stitch path. And this one's done, there's two ways to do this. This one, if I come across and right-click at the end, then you see I still have my cursor hanging out there. Then I simply left-click going back, and it can be wherever away from there, and it will create the other side of the path. I'm going to turn off my stitch ends so I don't see those anymore. So you go up one side and back down the other. So you walk, it's like if you're driving on the freeway and you want to go here and then come back. You're driving on either side. Now the classic satin works a little bit differently. You do each side as you go. So if I click on the top side, then I click on the bottom. Then I click on the top and the bottom. And wherever I click, and you see the opposing node where the little red or the little blue square is, that will be an angle line where that yellow line goes down between those stitches. And that's how that one gets input. The steel stitch, which is this one right here, is like a run stitch, only it's a column stitch. I call it a balanced satin. It's the same on both sides, and it is a bolder outline stitch. So I would digitize it just like I would a run stitch, right-click at the end, and it puts a defined width of satin stitch on the screen for me and determines its own angles, and that's what that one does. Now let's go to the next one that we can input. This is in digitizing mode, is the complex fill. When I do a complex fill, it assumes it's going to be filled. Now you notice my lines just started curving. I'm using simple draw, but if I hold down the control key while I'm clicking my nodes, it will curve that line. And of course I can always go back and adjust those angles and the curves by a function I'll show you in just a moment. But that gives me the curved lines as opposed to just straight lines. And then we have applique. If I wanted to create an applique shape from scratch or with a backdrop, I've created my shape. Now when I look at my applique, you will see, let's scroll in very closely here, that, let me take it off of 3D. It does a placement line for me, then it does a tack down inside of that placement line, and then it does my finishing stitch, which it defaults to a satin stitch, but of course you can make that any stitch you want in the properties. So you create it up here, and the same with the puffy stitch, and with cross stitch works like a fill, only instead of a regular fill, it's a cross stitch fill. And tackle twill works the same way as an applique, only you have to, it doesn't default to have a tack down and a placement line. It's like a zigzag stitch around that item, which is often used, and you've got this funky little connection or corner on it that allows it to hold that fabric down. This is used often for uniforms and sports and all of that type of thing. Now, another mode that we have, and I'm just scrolling back out using the roller on my mouse, I'm going to open up another new document, and we have artwork tools. Now our artwork tools we can digitize as well. We can create artwork from scratch, and that's really what digitizing means. You're creating something from scratch. Now I could create a rectangle. If I want a square, I hold the control key down, so I'm controlling the rectangle. It makes it a square, and the same is true for the triangle and the ellipse and the diamond. The pen just works like a regular drawing, but of course if you have a tablet you can use the pen and the drawing tool to do a lot of different things. You could also use that for the run stitch and other digitizing elements of the software. And the artwork is very helpful in a lot of things. I'll use artwork to set up boundaries. If I'm doing a lampshade, I'm going to draw that lampshade. Actually, I usually scan it, bring it up as a backdrop, and then convert that to artwork. And I'll show you how that works in just a moment. The other things up here on the top line that we have are symbols and, of course, our magic wand and our notes. The symbols, I can click select. It will show me these are all just small designs. And I can do lots of different things with these. I can select the dot and click OK and come out here and just create dots wherever I want to. I could also convert something to symbols. For example, let's take this square, and if I want to convert it to a run stitch, then I can take the run stitch and convert it to symbols. So there's lots of different ways to use these. And I'll select the dots, which start with the D. There they are. And click OK. And apply. So now I converted that square to dots. And I can change the size of that if I choose to as well. Let's talk about new page. And I'm going to go back over here to the left-hand side. But before I do that, no, that's fine. Let's do that. I'm going to go back over here to the left-hand side, and I have a backdrop tool. Now, the backdrop, this can be, I can go anywhere on my computer. This is a picture that I'm going to bring up to copy, to use as a tracing, like a light board. I could select any of these, and I do have one in here. Oh, this necktie. And this is just a simple JPEG that I found. And the first thing I want to do is resize this, because if I'm going to digitize something with it, I want to make sure that it's the right size, because that will determine how much detail I need as well as how much space I need. And here I'm going to change this to a width of 2 inches, and it adjusts my height accordingly. Okay, so here's my backdrop, and you see it's just kind of underneath my screen. But now I could come up and take one of my digitizing tools, like a complex fill, and let's come down to the bottom. Down here on the bottom right-hand corner, I'll select a color. Let's say color 4. I right-click on that to pick up the orange color. I'm going to select my complex fill, and I could come in here and use this, and I could manually digitize around it just like this. But I don't find that real fun. So I can just backspace out of it, and instead of manually outlining that, I'm going to select my magic wand, because I always say if you have a magic wand, you ought to use it. And all I have to do, I've got my color selected, is click on that. It puts my nodes in for me. It does all of the outline for me. Then I right-click, and it fills it in with stitches. I'll do it on this part of the tie as well. Left-click, puts all my nodes in, and you can see right here this yellow line and my angle line. I right-click, and it fills it with stitches. Now, back over on the left-hand side here, this is my backdrop view. If I click on this, it takes the backdrop away. And now I see I've got a tie. If I turn it on 3D, it's filled with stitches. It's not a very interesting tie, but it's a tie. I could change those stitches into different types of stitches or a pattern. But what I've done with this before that was really cute, instead of digitizing it as a fill stitch, and I'm going to bring my backdrop back up, and we'll just undo that. Up here at the top, this will be your favorite tool. This is the undo tool. And I'm going to click undo, undo, and now I'm back where I started. And of course I could redo if I wanted to redo what I undid, but right now I'm going to leave it undone. And while I've got my magic wand selected at the top, I'm going to select Applique. And I'm going to click right here and click right here. And let's dismiss the backdrop. And there I have an applique tie that I could put on a onesie, or another a t-shirt for a kid or something like that, or even for my son who doesn't like to wear ties. And it's already done for me. Now, I can do things a couple of different ways as well. Let's go back and undo that. You can do a combination, which is actually what I did on this. Let's bring our backdrop back up. I'm going to uncheck my magic wand. I'm going to select applique, and then come in here and say here to here, and just follow the shape of this. And there's not so many nodes here that I get bored quick. And then right-click when I'm done, and I've created the bottom part of the tie. Then I can click my magic wand again and select the top part with my applique selected. And now, when I dismiss the picture, you can see I only have the top part and the bottom part, and there's no overlap. If I move this out of the way, see, I'm laying down this. There's not a a satin stitch applique going across there. This one covers it up. So I'm good to go. Very easy to do. So Dory, how are we doing? Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a really good question here. What is the puffy stitch next to the applique stitch icon again? Would you please tell me?
Yes, that is, if I wanted to change this applique, if I wanted to use puffy foam or any of those products that tear away on the outside when you do them, those have to be a certain density to perforate the foam so that it will tear. But the problem with them, and let's just convert this to puffy stitch, the problem with them is that sometimes, if you're not careful, it will pull it away from the inside as well. So typically, and I've adjusted this, I'm going to move my tack stitch offset in further, and actually let's do it. So now I've got, oh, that's not a very pretty line. I can take my offset, and I want to do a run stitch around the center of that. That's what the puffy foam is for. And that's being enhanced to do some other things as well. So stay tuned for that stitch a little bit more. Okay. Now, let's go and open up a new file, and I want to show you some of the other fun tools we have. I had set this up before in my samples. These are some designs from our text designs up here in the top left-hand corner. And if I click that, you can see I've got this angel alphabet. Well, what I want to do is stitch out a bunch of these on felt and make them into refrigerator magnets. I think that would be really cute. So I've added all of these to the, oops, I want to undo that, to the screen here. And I'm going to turn off my commands too. Those little scissors at the angel's throats are bothering me just a bit. So I have these all, and I've just pulled them in here, and they're not really organized very well. One of the things that we have with the software is the ability to select multiple items. Oh, they're grouped. Let me ungroup them first. Whenever you bring an item in from, or most often when you bring an item in from the design library, it comes in grouped, so you can rotate it, resize it, and all of that without affecting individual parts of the design. You can treat it as a whole. But in this case, I want to select the angels on the top here, and I want to put them in a row. I could align them to the top or the bottom using my alignment features right here in the center. So if I align them to, whoop, undo, okay, what I forgot was when I bring them in originally from this, they're already grouped. So I'm going to group these angels in their individual designs rather than as a whole group because I don't want them to fall apart like they just did. So here's my grouping, and you just click group on the icon, or you can right click and hit group, and that means it'll hold it together so that they won't smush like they just did a minute ago. And here we are grouped. Okay, so I've got the top 4 already grouped. I can use my alignment tools now. I can vertically align them, which is actually, and this vertical align aligns them across a horizontal line. And I know that doesn't make sense, but that's the way it works. And it does, too, from a programmer standpoint, because we've discussed it. But it will group them across a horizontal line. It's aligning them vertically is what the answer was. I can also take that same group, and here where I have the distribute horizontal, I can click that, and that will space each of those equidistant from each other within that area. So it keeps the first one and the last one where they were, and it distributes the other ones in between. I can do the same thing if I select these going down, and I could align them across the horizontal center align, which looks like it would be vertical, but it's moving them horizontally. It's not aligning them horizontally, it's the way they're moved. And then distribute them vertically. Okay, so it's moving them up and down there. So that's one way to get all of these little angels lined up, since they're all different. If they were all the same, let me open up a new file here, and I'm going to select just one of these text designs. Let's see. Perhaps we want to do, let's come back up here and do something fun. Well, how about an armadillo? I haven't seen any of them out lately. They must like the hot weather better. Okay, so here's an armadillo. And I want to do several repeats of this. I want to, for some reason, I want to have a bunch of armadillos stitched out on something. I can come up here with my armadillo selected and click on my repeat tool and repeat the selected path. Aren't they cute? Now, I can adjust the number across and the number down. I can, let's make it 4 down. We'll have 16 armadillos. Maybe we're making like checkers, only we're going to have red and black armadillos. That'd be kind of fun. And I'm going to change the horizontal distance between them. I want them to be at least 1/4 of an inch, because that's my measurement, apart. Not 0.25, 0.25, and I want them that distance from each other as well. Okay, so that's good. Now, I could have them flip. This is a new feature with the software this month, and flip every other one horizontally, so they have an armadillo fight, or vertically, upside down, whichever one I want to do. And I look and I get it all adjusted before I click OK. And here's my offsets. I can change how far apart they're spaced and all of that. But we'll just say, OK, we've got now 16 armadillos on our page. And if I look over in my sequence view, even though this is just a simple 2-color design, I am now looking at changing colors on all of these armadillos umpteen times. Now, I did have an option in that tool when I selected it down here that I could auto resequence by color, but I always forget to do that. So even though they're already on my screen, I can select all of them by doing a Control-A or dragging a box around them, and then come into my edit and select resequence by color as one of my edit tools. And now, in a moment, I'll only have 2 color changes for these armadillos. Armadillos are very slow. That's why they're always dead on the side of the road. Okay, here we go. So here are all my armadillos, and I'm looking at it going from one to the other one, and then there's a big jump stitch coming back across here. I can select them again, and let's see. Okay, select them all. And I can optimize my entry and exit points so that I won't have, it'll be a closest point connect on those. It'll still go in the same sequence, so I would need to optimize my stitching sequence as well. So I select all of those, and click on Optimize Sequence. And like I said, armadillos aren't the fastest animal, and neither is my computer. All right. Come on, honey. I probably should have rebooted this week. It's really thinking about it. They don't have very big brains either, just like my computer right now. Oh. All right, now we've got them all over the place. So you can reorganize that sequence. So I'll come across here, then jump down and go back. All right, so enough with the armadillos. Let's move on to another function. I'm going to pull a design in out of my library. Let's do...
I love that library. Does that library hold designs from other places?
I'm sorry, what? Can the library hold designs from other places? Absolutely. This is where my dime-free designs go. So I'm looking at November, and I'm seeing we're coming on Christmas and winter. I can also add any designs I want to it. I tend to save all of my CQS designs in my library so that I can get to them quickly. What was that?
Goodness.
I hear someone. And I also, my inspiration collections are also stored here. When I install them, if I have the software on my computer, I can install them right here so that I can see all of my different design collections. Now I'm going to take, let's do a design from the Christmas confections. Since my neighbors are putting up Christmas lights, here's a design, and I pulled it in, and of course it comes in grouped. If I wanted to break it up, I could do that. But I'm going to play some other games with this one, so I'll leave it grouped. It's fine. I'm going to use the circle template on this, and I can select on the side if I want to do a shape, a reflection, or a scatter template, or a basic circle template. Let's click on the circle first. Now here it defaults to 8 repetitions and an angle of 45 degrees when there's 8 of them. If I make it 5, it changes the angle for me. I can apply that. I can make my circle size smaller. Maybe I want to make it 100 millimeters and apply that. I could change the angle of the way the holly is shown by clicking here. We'll make it 45 degrees and see what happens. I like to play around with it because a lot of times you get very different looks depending on the angle that you use. So there's an option there. And I can auto resequence by color so I don't have umpteen color changes when I go to stitch this design out. I'm going to cancel this, and let's go back up and see what our other options were or are with the holly. One thing I do want to do, though, is rotate it a little bit. And with it selected, I can do that right here with the tool on the side and adjust it just the way I want it because I want it to be kind of straight. And then I can go to my shape template. Now, this is something that was just added to the software. If you want to do all of these different shapes, and I don't know about you, but I'm thinking necklines or napkins or, you know, tree skirts that might have scallops around the edge. You could do a lot of different things with these. There's the corner template or a scoop template, and you can certainly, there's a t-shirt, so that would be more like a crew neck, and the wave to where it's up and down. So if you're going to do a runner of these, you can do that. You can also change the scale and the offset and all of that on these different shapes. So that's an option. Another option with my circle template is the reflection template. This one is really fun. It defaults to have having both of them selected. If I just select the horizontal, then I'm going to get a row of these. And I can change the distance between them and adjust all of that. I could change the angle if I want to. If I want to, and the number of repeats. If I want 10 of these going, you know, in a row, I can do that. And of course, auto resequence by color. If I would rather do a vertical reflection, I'll click apply there. And I get that look. I'm not crazy about that. Let's rotate that 180 degrees and click apply. Oh, I think that's much cuter because they're facing each other, or the berries are next to each other. And if I want to do both, I can do that too. And that would make a very cute border around something. So lots of fun things without having to measure and distribute it myself and align it. This does it for me. Okay, my other option is the scatter template. Now this is kind of unique. If you have a design and you want to scatter it in different sizes over a given area. In this case, 200 by 200 is your area, so that would fit your 200 by 200 hoop. And I want to make my minimum size 50%. And my maximum size 100, and I'll just leave it with the default distance and click apply. Now I get lots of pieces, you know, all over in that 200 by 200 space. So you can get a more organic, scattered look. Because sometimes I know it's very difficult for those of us who want to be very precise to get something that looks like it has been scattered over an area, like on a placemat or on a lampshade or something like that. Very easy to do and to apply. Okay. Now, another function in this set of tools right here is the duplicate tool. And we've got that also by right-clicking on a design, but if I click on the icon, and when I go to duplicate, I could do my own little scattering here. If I just click, let me scroll out, it exactly duplicates it in the same angle and everything else. If I click and drag, I can rotate and resize that however I want to. So if I don't want the scatter template to do it, I can do it myself.
Oh, I could see that on one of the Christmas ugly sweaters, couldn't you?
Thanks, Story. Yeah, I could. But I don't want to spend that much time doing an ugly sweater. But it would. All right. If there was a contest, yes, that would be quite fun. All right. Now let's get back to our tools. We have some other fun stuff to go over. Let's open up a new page. And I'm going to use my artwork to create a couple of shapes. Let's do, actually, oh, this one's really fun. I want to create a circle or an ellipse. And I'm going to hold the control key down so I make a perfect circle, because that's the only way I'll be able to do it is if I hold the control key down. Now when I look over here in my properties at my transform, I've got a width of 2.9. I want to change this to, let's make it a 4-inch circle and click apply. All right. And in properties, I'm also going to change that to a fill and click apply. Now, here I have, it's just artwork. It's sitting on the top of my desk, or my design page. If I select it and right-click, I can convert it, rather because I've already created it, then it's a process of converting it instead of being in digitizing mode. All right, so I could convert it to a run, a satin, a steel, a complex fill, cross stitch, applique, puffy stitch, tackle twill, any of those things that I want to. But for right now, I'm going to leave it as artwork. If I want to put another symbol in the center of it, I can do a diamond. Oh, and I probably should have changed the color on that. Let's do that now. I'm going to change it to red. And I'm going to fill it as well. Okay, so now I have a red diamond in my blue circle. If I click over here on my shape tool, then I can change the properties of this diamond. I can move the nodes, and very simply I can put this exactly in the center, and maybe I want one up here and one down here, and create a rectangle in my circle. I'm not really wild about that, so I'm just going to make it even and maybe in just a hair from the edge of my design, or from my circle. So I can play with artwork and create lots of different things. Now with that done, I've got a square and a circle. I can select both elements by, first I've got to be in select mode, click the arrow, and select both elements and combine them. Now what happens when you combine two things are a couple of things. Number one, it says take this element and make them into one thing. So my red, since it's smaller, is going to be like a cookie cutter, and the blue like my dough. So I just cut a square out of, or a diamond, out of the center of my circle. That's one way to do it. I'm going to do undo. And I could also take this and move it, let's get it just a little bit to the side here, okay? And I can come up here to these tools by selecting both my circle and my square. I could trim them. Now what's happened, although it's difficult to see, is it cut away just underneath and left my square there. So it's a little bit different than combine. It leaves the shape, the original shape, as well as cutting a hole in the underneath shape. And this works both with, all of these tools that I'm showing you work both with artwork and with a complex fill. From those, you can take it to anything else you want. But if you're working with a artwork or complex fill, you can do all of these different things. That was trim. Now let's, with both of them selected, do combine or weld. Now that changes it into a single object that looks like something. It's not Pac-Man, kind of reverse Pac-Man. Like what? A bird with a beak? Okay, that's good. All right, I like that. I see that right away. Okay, now I'm going to undo that to where we're back to our circle and square, and then intersect. So it's going to intersect the selected paths. Oops, but not unless I select everything. So I'm going to do a Control-A and then do my intersect. And now, oh, that's interesting. That was the only part that intersected. Let's try that again. I'm going to move this over. Oh, because, oh, that's why I went too far back. See? Okay, let's put this here, select both of them, and we'll do the intersect. That's where you go. So I've got a piece of pie now. So those are what these different tools do. I'm going to show you one other tool, very interesting, before we close. That's kind of fun. Let's open up a new page. And I'm going to go into my file, and I want to import TrueType text. Now I want to do it this way instead of using my text tool and my monogram tool, which we'll talk about in another webinar. Because I want it to come in as artwork and stay artwork. So I'm going to select a letter, such as an E, for Eileen Roche, of course, and click on my 3 dots, which will bring up all of those fonts that live out there in my computer. And I want to pick one that's pretty hardy. Let's do Copper or Cooper. I never can remember until I look at it which one it is. So I'm just scrolling through my CO. Okay. Either way, it's CO. I'm getting there. Cooper. There it is. So I'm going to have a big bold E and click OK. And OK again. And it brings up an E in artwork. I'm going to go ahead and fill that so that it's easier to see and resize it by clicking on Transform. And I want to make this 4 inches high and click Apply. Now let's make it, center it in the page. The next thing I want to do is select it and use my Slice tool. Now once again, the Slice works with artwork and with a complex fill, both the same way. So if I don't, I can do it with either one. I'm going to select the knife, which is my Slice tool, and because I centered this, I know that this is the horizontal center of this artwork. And I just pull, it's like an angle line. I can pull this over and let go. Now you see I've got a red line in between that. When I right click, it sets that as the center or as a slice in my design. It's still all one piece. So what I want to do next is select the E, and you can see there's a line there in the center. I'm going to right click and say break apart. Now this has 2 halves. What I want to do next is separate these 2. And actually I want to keep them aligned, so I'm going to, if I do align center, nope. If I do, there we go. That looks like it meets pretty well. Okay, so now I've split that E apart. How many times have we seen this in different things? I'm going to right click and convert it to an applique. Now I can add fabric and audition it in there and all of that, but let me show you what my finished product looked like. In my samples, and here you go. So you can split the letter, put some wording in between it. I added a steel stitch across here. We can look at it in 3D. I've auditioned fabric, used different fonts to set that up, and created a brand new design. And I love using the TrueType fonts for that and the Slice tool. Another thing that I found with that Slice tool that you can do, I could take this, let's go back by doing undo or Control Z, and okay, so I want my Slice tool in there. If I select with my, see it's still one object, I'm going to select my Slice tool again, click on, well, let's go back before that. I'm going to do my slice. Before I set it, I'm just going to come across here, set it. then I can come back in here and add a point or 2 or 3. So I could make this a curvy line if I want to, and match it up with the other one, and I'll get a very different look when I break them apart. So,
that's so cool.
So experiment with the different tools. Actually, I did that too soon, but that's okay. Experiment with the different tools. Slice is a fun tool to use to cut. You know, you can't do it with text, but you can do it with TrueType fonts. You can change angle lines. You can add as many slices as you want to that. It's quite fun. And I think, unless you've got more questions for me, we are almost out of time.
Well, I thank you very much, Tamara. You did an excellent job. We do have one last question that I think you can answer quickly, and that is, how do you audition fabrics? What does that mean?
Oh, that's real easy. When I have, let's convert this to applique. Okay. So here's my applique. I just come over in this program, I go to my commands, and I can click on my fabric library, and it's going to take it a moment because I have a fairly extensive one. And if you have PEP as well as one of the other quilting programs, either my Quilt Embellisher or my Block Piecer, you share a common library with them. So I have like tons of fabric in here. So I can come in and select this blue fabric and see what that would look like in there and look at it in 3D. And I think we do have,
awesome.
Yeah, so I think we do have a webinar coming up on auditioning things, trying out different ideas and colors and fabrics and all of that. So stay tuned for our next webinar. I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and I wish you all safe travels. And thank you, Dory and Chris and Nancy, for your help today. And I will tell you all good night.
We thank you, and happy birthday again, Tamara.
Oh,
Good night.
thank you, Dory. Good night.